They drenched her in Coca-Cola. The dark liquid slid down Amina Carter's curls, tracing icy lines across her navy and white blouse as the laughter of Victoria Hale, the so-called star manager of NovaSphere Media, cracked through the office like broken glass. "Oops, consider it a refresh for those mediocre ideas of yours." Behind her, Connor Briggs lifted his phone to record, smiling as if he had just discovered the next viral humiliation. Beside him, Emily Tran typed furiously, already crafting a mocking post for her followers. "When you hire based on quotas, this is what you get. #reality." In that moment, in that polished glass conference room high above Radiant Square, corporate cruelty was no longer subtle. It was loud, racial, deliberate. Amina stood there, the only black analyst in the entire department, letting the soda drip onto the investor reports she had spent all night perfecting. 6 months of whispered insults, stolen ideas, and silent stares had led to this climax of humiliation. Victoria leaned in, her perfume cutting through the sticky sweetness of the Coke. "You really thought you belonged at our table? You and that little public college degree?" The room buzzed with the cruel thrill of a corporate scandal unfolding in real time. But Amina did not flinch. She did not cry. She simply lifted her phone, her brown eyes calm in a way that terrified the people who thought they owned her fear. One message, one quiet tap. And then she whispered, almost kindly, "You just made the biggest mistake of your lives." Connor lowered his camera for the first time, thrown off. Emily sensed something strange, something wrong. Victoria scoffed, but even she hesitated when Amina checked the sleek Blackwell watch on her wrist. 15 minutes. That is all it will take for you to understand everything. If you have ever witnessed racism or humiliation in the workplace, stay with this story. And if you believe justice should always find its way to the surface, subscribe now. What happens next will shock you, because in exactly 15 minutes, a billionaire will walk through those doors, and the world inside this office will never be the same. The brown soda kept sliding from Amina Carter's curls, dripping quietly onto the carpet as if marking every second she had endured in this place. NovaSphere's 22nd floor looked polished, modern, almost beautiful in the morning light, but what lived inside these glass walls was anything but. Behind the sleek desks and curated branding decks, the environment pulsed with something toxic, something sharp enough to cut a woman down long before anyone noticed she was bleeding. For 6 months, that poison had been directed at one person, Amina. 29 years old, the youngest data analyst NovaSphere had ever hired, and easily the brightest mind in the entire department. She was the kind of brilliance that intimidated people who confused privilege with talent, the kind of quiet excellence that threatened those whose confidence existed only in the dark corners of office gossip. And that was exactly why the wolves had circled her. Victoria Hale, the manager everyone pretended to admire but secretly feared. Connor Briggs, the smirking account coordinator who believed cruelty was a personality trait. And Emily Tran, the HR assistant who enforced the culture of silence with a smile that never reached her eyes. They had watched Amina walk in on her first day, poised, focused, wearing a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from discipline, a woman who earned every step she took, and they despised her for it. It started with emails, subtle at first, snide comments buried under corporate wording. "Congratulations on your first week. Hopefully your next report will feel more aligned with your background." Then the jokes in meetings, a stolen idea here, an eye roll there, a sudden, forgotten invitation to a client briefing. Like paper cuts, each incident was small, almost invisible alone, but together they built a wound designed to make her doubt herself. But she never faltered, never raised her voice, never broke her stride. Amina delivered flawless reports, predicted trends no one else even saw forming, and built models the senior team praised without knowing she had also saved them from a disastrous quarter. She never bragged. She never corrected credit thieves. She simply kept doing the work. And the better she became, the more vicious the wolves grew. What none of them knew was that the day they poured soda over her head, Amina had already submitted an $8 million strategic framework to the executive board, a framework Victoria had secretly planned to steal and present as her own at the Investor Summit. Amina had known this. She had seen the metadata edits Victoria tried to conceal. But she stayed silent, letting the truth gather its weight, letting the fall become inevitable. Because some collapses don't happen suddenly, some are orchestrated, precise, the result of patience used as a weapon. And on this morning, as the coke dripped from her hair and the wolves laughed, the collapse had already begun. If this part of the story ignites something in you, stay with me. Every 30 seconds from here on out, the truth will strike harder than the last. The room didn't know what to do with Amina's silence. Not the kind of silence born from shock or defeat, but the stillness of someone who has already made peace with what comes next. The coke had stopped dripping, the laughter had thinned, and for the first time since the humiliation began, the air shifted. Slowly, almost deliberately, Amina raised her wrist and glanced at the Blackwell edition watch resting against her skin. A watch no one had ever noticed, because no one ever bothered to look closely at the woman they assumed was beneath them. She studied the time, then exhaled. A faint smile touching her lips. Not amusement, not fear, something else entirely. Something unnervingly calm. Connor Briggs was the first to sense it. His phone wavered in his hand. She isn't crying. Why isn't she crying? For months he had watched her swallow every slight, every insult, every theft of her ideas. He assumed she stayed quiet because she was weak. But the woman in front of him wasn't weak. She looked like someone waiting for a train she knew would arrive on schedule. Emily felt it too, a prickle at the back of her neck. Amina's posture, her breathing, even her eyes seemed wrong, too steady, too certain. It was like watching the ocean go still before a storm splits the sky open. Victoria Hale, of course, noticed none of it. She mistook composure for submission, mistook grace for fear. Standing tall, chin tilted with practiced superiority, she scoffed. "What are you smiling at?" Amina finally looked at her, not up, not down, directly. "You just made the biggest mistake of your lives." It was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. 30 seconds passed. Something hummed in the distance. Then the lighting along the private elevator track flickered, once, then again, as if the building itself sensed what was coming. A soft electronic pulse echoed down the hall. Emily's face went pale. Connor lowered his phone completely. And Amina, still impossibly calm, wiped a trace of soda from her cheek as though preparing for a moment she had envisioned long before today. 15 minutes, she murmured, more to herself than to them. That's all it takes for the truth to arrive. As the VIP elevator lights continued to blink, every person in that room felt the same question rise in their throat. What was she waiting for? And why did it suddenly feel like they weren't the ones in control anymore? The lights along the VIP elevator strip pulsed one last time, then froze. A single resonant chime rolled through the floor, low and thunderous, as if the entire building inhaled at once. Every head turned. Even Victoria's smirk faltered. The doors slid open with a slow, deliberate glide, revealing not chaos, not confusion, but precision, purpose, and power. 3 security officers stepped out first, formation tight, uniform sharp, eyes scanning the room like they had memorized every threat before arriving. Their presence alone shifted the energy, but what came next shifted the ground beneath every person standing there. Dominic Blackwell. He didn't walk out of the elevator. He emerged, the way a storm emerges on the horizon long before the first crack of thunder. Tailored charcoal suit, shoulders straight, posture carved from certainty, the kind of confidence that didn't need to be announced because the room announced it for him. People went silent without knowing why. Even the air felt heavier, as though gravity itself leaned closer. He took one step into the office, and the murmurs died. Another step, and Connor Briggs's knees nearly buckled. Then Dominic saw her. His gaze landed on Amina, taking in the soda-soaked curls, the stained blouse, the humiliation she had been forced to endure. And something in him changed shape. His expression did not explode outward like a wild temper. It collapsed inward, focused, sharpened. Rage, absolute and controlled, gathered behind his eyes like a tidal wave held back by will alone. When he spoke, his voice didn't need volume. It had weight. "Security, remove those three from this floor, now!" Not a shout, not a request, a verdict. The room fractured instantly. Emily staggered backward. Connor's breath hitched. And for the first time since she had joined the company, Victoria Hale looked afraid. "Excuse me," she snapped, voice cracking at the edges. "Who exactly do you think you are? This is my office. She is my employee. You have no authority here." Dominic turned to her slowly, the way a lion might turn to acknowledge something making noise beneath its paws. His jaw tightened just once. "Who am I?" He stepped closer, and Victoria instinctively stepped back. "I own this building." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They simply detonated. In that moment, the power dynamic shifted so violently, the room seemed to tilt. Amina remained still, watching him with that same steady calm she had held all morning. Because she knew. She had always known. And now, everyone else did too. Stay with this story. The justice you are about to witness will rewrite the rules. For a long, suspended moment, no one in the room understood why a man like Dominic Blackwell would erupt onto their floor with that kind of authority, that kind of fury. But Amina knew. She had always known this day would come. And now the truth began to surface, slow and unstoppable, like a leviathan rising from deep water. Dominic didn't look at Victoria, Connor, or Emily. He kept his eyes on Amina, reading every trace of what she had endured. Then, with a breath that steadied him only slightly, he said the words that shattered the office's illusion of hierarchy. "Are you all right, my love?" The room froze. Not figuratively, literally. It was as though oxygen had been vacuumed out of the 22nd floor. Victoria's mouth fell open before she clamped it shut again, blinking as if trying to reset the scene. "You're... what?" Amina turned toward her, and for the first time since she'd joined NovaSphere, she allowed the truth to sit openly on her shoulders. "I am Amina Carter Blackwell," she said, Dominic's wife. A gasp rippled through the room like a shockwave. Connor nearly dropped his phone. Emily pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. And Victoria, the self-appointed queen of this poisoned kingdom, took another involuntary step back. It felt impossible, unbelievable. The woman they had mocked for her background, her voice, her education, was married to one of the most powerful men in the tech world. But this wasn't the part that stunned them most. It was what came next. Amina didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Before I met Dominic, I earned a full-ride scholarship to MIT. I won the Hawthorne Prize for Machine Learning Innovation. He wasn't interested in me because of who he was. He fell in love with me because of a 3-hour debate we had over predictive ethics in AI modeling." Dominic let out a soft exhale, the ghost of a proud smile crossing his face as he remembered it. Amina continued, "But I refused to enter NovaSphere using his name. I wanted to see how far merit alone could take me. I wanted to earn my place here without shortcuts." The irony was painful. For 6 months, she had built flawless analytic systems and elevated campaigns that others took credit for. And all the while, the wolves had compared her to quotas and stereotypes, never once imagining they were clawing at someone far beyond their reach. But the part that turned their fear into dread was when she added, "And during those 6 months, I documented everything." She reached for the folder she had tucked beneath her arm, now dotted with dried soda. "Every email, every whispered insult, every meeting where my ideas were stolen, every unapproved recording you thought no one noticed, every group chat you assumed couldn't be traced." Connor's face drained of color. Emily swayed slightly. Victoria looked like she wanted to run, but couldn't remember how her legs worked. "And it wasn't just your harassment," Amina said. "I also analyzed every breach of ethical conduct across this department. Plagiarism, data manipulation, policy violations, a full behavioral audit of the entire team." She opened the folder. The sound was quiet, but in that silence, it cracked like thunder. "This," she said, "is the truth you built, and today, it finally sees the light." 30 seconds passed, long enough for every guilty person in the room to realize the same thing. They hadn't just humiliated the wrong woman. They had underestimated the one woman capable of dismantling them completely. Stay with this story, because what happens next is more than justice. It is the moment the hunted becomes the architect of the hunt. The moment Amina opened that folder, the entire floor seemed to contract, as if the walls themselves were bracing for impact. But the real blow didn't come from her. It came from the man who stepped out of the elevator behind Dominic Blackwell, carrying a stack of documents so thick it looked like a courtroom had been bound into a single volume. Philip Tran, Chief Legal Architect of Blackwell Industries, a man whose reputation was built on destroying corporate corruption with surgical precision. When Philip walked, people didn't just move aside. They reconsidered their life choices. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the room once, and handed the mountain of evidence to Dominic before speaking in a calm, measured tone that somehow made the moment even more terrifying. "These," he said, "are the documented violations committed by members of this department." Dominic passed the stack to security, and the officers fanned the pages across the table near the glass wall. Emails, printouts, screenshots, transcripts. Amina had not missed a single moment. The lights dimmed as Philip connected to the LED display. The screen flickered, then exploded into clarity with the first piece of evidence, an email from Victoria. Subject line, "New diversity arrived today. Body. I give her a month before she's running back to whatever ghetto she crawled out of." A gasp rose from the desks behind them. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." 30 seconds later, the next image hit. Group chat. Nova Elite. Connor Briggs had posted a photo of Amina at the printer, captioned, "Found the missing maid. Should we tip her or call her Uber?" The room erupted with shocked murmurs. Connor stumbled backward, shaking his head as though denial could change the pixels glowing on the wall. "That's taken out of context," he blurted, voice cracking. "It was just a joke." Amina didn't even look at him. Philip didn't pause. The next slide appeared. A vertical video from Emily's Instagram archive. She had recorded Amina during her lunch break, alone at a small corner table. Emily's caption, "When the quota has no friends, #truth." The silence that followed was brutal. Not empty, not quiet, but heavy, accusing. For 6 months, these behaviors had been hidden behind closed doors, whispered hallways, inside group chats they thought disappeared. But on a 20-foot LED wall, under harsh white office lights, every insult became permanent. Every cruelty became undeniable. Philip turned back to them. "This is only a fraction," he said. "There are 73 additional incidents of harassment, misconduct, data breaches, and personal targeting recorded and time-stamped." He tapped the stack of documents, "all collected by Mrs. Amina Carter Blackwell." Victoria's legs gave out, and she caught herself on the back of a chair. Connor covered his face with both hands. Emily's eyes filled, not with remorse, but with fear of consequences she could no longer outrun. The truth had not whispered its way into the room. It had slammed through the doors, unapologetic and devastating. And each new piece of evidence hit with the force of a blade. Sharp, final, deserved. Stay with this story, because the next revelation will make everything you've heard so far feel like only the opening strike. The screen went dark for a moment, a brief silence settling over the room like the breath before an earthquake. When the next slide illuminated the LED wall, it wasn't another insult, another message dripping with bias. It was a blueprint, a sleek interface, a title glowing in electric blue. NovaVision Predictive Analysis System, developed by Amina Carter Blackwell. A ripple of confusion moved across the floor, then awe, then something closer to fear. Philip Tran stepped forward, his tone shifting into something deeper, weightier, the kind of delivery reserved for courtroom finales and historic announcements. "This," he said, "is a proprietary marketing intelligence engine. Projected valuation, $55 million. $55 million. The number slammed into the room with the force of a falling monument. Victoria blinked rapidly, as though her mind was refusing to process reality. She didn't create that. She's an analyst." Dominic finally looked at her, a faint edge of disbelief in his expression. "No, she's the architect of a system that will redefine data analysis across this industry." Amina remained still, quiet, almost humble in the face of her own brilliance. She didn't need to brag. The work spoke louder than any voice in this building ever had. Philip advanced the slide. Projected efficiency increase 47%. Projected revenue impact exponential. Ownership, Blackwell Industries, purchased outright from the inventor. Another whisper shot through the office. Someone muttered, "Purchased? From her?" Another voice cracked, "She sold it?" Philip answered without looking away from the screen. "Yes. Dominic Blackwell acquired exclusive rights to NovaVision. The full contract is executed and finalized." He tapped the folder. "In her name." There was no fight left in Victoria's posture now. She swayed where she stood, understanding too late that she hadn't been competing with an analyst. She had been competing with a visionary, a woman who had outworked, outthought, and outclassed her at every turn. Dominic added, voice low but penetrating, "And every cent generated by NovaVision over the next 20 years will be directed into the Amina Carter Fund for Black Youth in Technology." 20 years, $55 million. A legacy built from ashes they thought would bury her. Connor wheezed out, "Wait, what fund?" Philip flipped to the next document. "The fund your forfeited shares will now support." The screen changed again. 3 red boxes appeared over the NovaSphere shareholder chart. Victoria Hale, Connor Briggs, Emily Tran. Terminated. Shares seized for cause. Liquidation redirected to scholarship endowment. Emily's knees buckled. Connor cursed under his breath. Victoria pressed her palm to her forehead as though the truth itself was too heavy to hold. Amina looked at them, calm, composed, devastating in her clarity. "You tried to take my work," she said. "So now my work will take everything you built on my suffering and turn it into opportunity for those who deserve better." There was no cruelty in her tone, only resolve, purpose, power. Every 30 seconds, the truth kept hitting harder. And this revelation landed like the biggest blow of all. Amina Carter hadn't just survived their attempts to destroy her. She had transformed those attempts into a multimillion-dollar platform for justice. Stay with this story, because the fall isn't over, and neither is her rise. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, each heavier than the last, each one dragging the bullies further underwater until there was no illusion left for them to cling to. Victoria Hale was the first to break. A moment ago she had stood tall, chin lifted, wrapped in the self-appointed royalty of a manager who believed she controlled everyone beneath her. But now her face crumpled, the last veneer of arrogance peeling away. Her eyes flooded with panic as the reality of termination, forfeited shares, and public disgrace fused into one devastating truth. She stumbled forward and fell to her knees. "Amina, please, please, I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her voice quivered, uneven, the sound of a person watching her carefully constructed world collapse plank by plank. "I have a mortgage, and my mother is sick. I can't lose everything." But Amina didn't answer. Not yet. She simply looked at her with a steady, unreadable expression, the same expression she had worn through every insult, every stolen idea, every whispered joke that Victoria thought would never catch up to her. 30 seconds later, the next wave hit. Connor Briggs exploded, not with confidence, not with mockery this time, but with the fury of a man whose bravado had been ripped away in front of an audience. His hands balled into fists, his face flushed red, and his voice cracked with desperation rather than dominance. "This is insane," he shouted. "You can't just destroy my career over jokes. Everybody jokes, everybody talks. This isn't fair." But even as he raged, his shoulders sagged. The fight seeped out of him as quickly as it arrived, because deep down, beneath the panic, he knew the truth. His cruelty wasn't a joke. It was a choice. And now that choice had consequences he could no longer outrun. He looked at Amina then, not with apology, but with the hollow dread of a man who finally understood he had picked the wrong target. 30 seconds more, and the final collapse came softly. Emily Tran's voice barely surfaced as she wiped tears from her mascara-streaked cheeks. She trembled, gripping the edge of a desk to steady herself. "Amina, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just followed along because I didn't want them to turn on me. Amina turned her gaze to her. And that made it acceptable? Emily's breath hitched. She shook her head, covering her face with shaking hands. Every soul in that room felt the shift then. This was not revenge. It wasn't petty or chaotic or emotional. What they were witnessing was clarity, accountability, justice. And finally, Amina spoke. I had bills too, she said quietly. When you sabotaged my projects, when you laughed at my work, when you tried to make me feel small, I had responsibilities, a family, a future I was trying to build. Her voice deepened, not louder, just fuller, carrying the weight of every moment she had endured in silence. The difference is that I didn't use my pain as an excuse to hurt anyone else. Victoria's sobs filled the room. Connor stared at the floor, hollow and stunned. Emily clung to whatever dignity she had left, though it slipped through her fingers like water. Amina stood unmoved. Her dignity was intact. Theirs had crumbled to dust. And for the first time since this story began, the entire office understood something profound. The collapse of bullies is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is personal. Sometimes it is the simple, undeniable realization that the person you tried to break is stronger than you ever imagined. Stay with this story, because their fall is only the beginning of what comes next. They didn't even have time to breathe before the next summons came. A shrill alert cut through the tension on the 22nd floor, flashing across every monitor with the same message. Emergency all-staff assembly. Mandatory. Now. Within minutes, the entire building funneled toward NovaSphere's panic room-style auditorium, a space designed for crisis briefings, investor disasters, and the kind of corporate emergencies employees whispered about but never witnessed. Today, they would witness everything. The auditorium lights were lower than usual, casting long shadows across the rows of seats. A hush fell over the crowd as the LED wall, 50 feet wide and unforgiving, flickered to life with a crackle of static. It felt less like a meeting and more like the opening moments of a trial. A judgment day dressed in corporate beige. Dominic Blackwell entered first, the air around him tightening. Philip Tran followed, carrying the same massive folder of evidence that had shattered the office upstairs. And then Amina walked in, calm, poised, a silent axis around which the entire room began to turn. People who had barely acknowledged her before now stared, not in curiosity, but in dread. They sensed instinctively that the hierarchy they had always known was about to be rewritten in real time. Philip stepped to the podium. We will now present the full record of harassment, discrimination, and unethical conduct documented within this department. The LED wall detonated with images, emails, screenshots, videos, transcripts. The same evidence revealed earlier, but magnified to a scale that made escape impossible. Every slur, every stolen idea, every malicious joke radiated across the auditorium, imprinting itself onto the shocked faces staring up at the screen. Victoria's voice echoed through the speakers in one slide. I bet she won't last a month. Let's place bets on when she crawls back to her ghetto. Connor's voice followed. Found the missing maid. Can someone call her Uber? Emily's caption flashed next. When the quota has no friends, #truth. The room recoiled. Gasps rippled through the aisles. Even those who weren't involved looked down at their shoes, ashamed of every moment they had remained silent. But the truth wasn't finished. Amina stepped forward. The screen shifted again, not to evidence of harassment, but something entirely different. A sleek interface, a real-time dashboard of ethical behavior analytics, bars, metrics, heat maps glowing red and green. This, Amina said, her voice carrying across the auditorium with surgical clarity, is an AI-driven system I designed to detect patterns of discrimination in corporate environments. The room buzzed with confusion. It identifies microaggressions, verbal bias, inequitable opportunity distribution, and differential treatment. Everything you saw today, this system predicted. Every behavior pattern, every escalation. She paused. And every attempt to hide it. Another slide appeared, data points mapped over 6 months, illustrating exactly how the toxic behavior had spread like a contagion. "This is not just about me," Amina continued. "This is about a culture that allowed hostility to thrive, a culture some of you witnessed, some of you participated in, and some of you ignored." 30 seconds passed. A tension thicker than silence filled the room. "But the most important thing you should understand," she said, leveling her gaze at the three offenders in the front row, "is that none of this would have been possible without your own actions. You wrote the messages, you shared the photos, you boasted about your cruelty, you built the pattern." She leaned in slightly. "You dug the hole." Then the final slide hit like a hammer. A red headline filled the screen: "Ethical Risk Index, Critical." Below it, 3 names pulsed in crimson: Victoria Hale, Connor Briggs, Emily Tran. Amina's voice hardened, not angry, not triumphant, simply resolute. "You built your own graves with every choice you made. I just documented the truth." The auditorium erupted, not in chaos, but in the stunned, electric energy of revelation. People felt as though they were watching the climax of a Netflix exposé, the moment when the villains finally faced the weight of their own downfall. And as Amina stepped back, the screen dimming behind her, the truth settled over the room with finality. "You buried yourselves," she said, "and today the world finally sees it." Stay with this story. The consequences that follow will shake more than just these walls. They will shake an entire industry. In the days that followed, it became clear that what happened in that auditorium wasn't just the collapse of 3 careers. It was the moment a legend was born, a seismic shift that rippled far beyond the 22nd floor of NovaSphere. And like all great shifts, it began with truth and ended with transformation. NovaSphere fell first. Once the evidence went public, major partners terminated contracts overnight. Investors withdrew. Stock plummeted. Within weeks, the once polished media giant crumbled under the weight of its own silence, its own complicity. Headlines blasted across every business outlet. NovaSphere execs ousted in discrimination scandal. Blackwell Industries cuts ties. Company files for bankruptcy. But where others saw ruin, Amina saw opportunity. Dominic purchased the property, the whole tower, and did something no one expected. He didn't rebuild it. He repurposed it. The following year, the same building where she had endured humiliation reopened with a new name glowing across its facade: the Amina Carter Institute for Technological Equity. Crowds gathered at the unveiling ceremony. Journalists, activists, CEOs, and young students who saw in Amina not just a survivor, but a mirror of their own potential. Cameras flashed as she stepped onto the podium, no longer the quiet analyst hiding brilliance behind humility, but the architect of a movement reshaping the future of tech. Her scholarship fund didn't help dozens, it helped hundreds. Over 600 young scholars from marginalized backgrounds were awarded full rides to the country's top programs: engineering, AI ethics, data science, robotics. Many were the first in their families to attend college. Some were the first to finish high school. All carried her legacy on their shoulders. Ethan Ward, the lone man who once dared to speak up for her on that disastrous afternoon, became the CTO of Blackwell Industries' new Diversity Innovations Division. He oversaw nationwide implementation of Amina's discrimination detection AI, ensuring every office, every boardroom, every hiring process was scrutinized with unblinking fairness. And then came the moment that proved Amina's rise wasn't a trend. It was a revolution. Blackwell Industries, Google, Apple, Microsoft. 3 of the largest tech giants on the planet signed an unprecedented joint initiative: mandatory adoption of Amina's system across their corporate ecosystems, a global standard born from one woman's courage to turn cruelty into code, humiliation into innovation, oppression into opportunity. Documentaries were made, university case studies published, conferences invited her as keynote speaker. She became a symbol not of victimhood, but of reinvention, proof that brilliance doesn't need permission, only persistence. And every 30 seconds of her journey echoed the same truth. Amina Carter didn't just rise, she rose so others could rise with her. Young students walked through the hallways of the new institute, carrying laptops and dreams she had made possible. Families cried at scholarship ceremonies, Reporters marveled at projections showing thousands more students who would follow. Because NovaSphere didn't just fall, it was transformed, reborn into a monument of justice wearing her name. And long after the last scandal headline faded, the legacy of that transformation stood tall, gleaming in the skyline, a reminder carved in steel and light. When a system tries to break the wrong woman, it may just end up building the world she imagined instead. Stay here. The next chapter of her rise will shake you even more. The lights inside Liberty Arts Hall dimmed to a soft amber glow, the kind reserved for premieres that would be remembered for decades. Rows upon rows of guests filled the grand auditorium, Fortune 500 executives, civil rights leaders, journalists, students, and people whose lives had been changed by a woman who once stood alone in a hostile office with Coca-Cola dripping from her hair. Tonight was the world premiere of Code Amina, Rise of Justice, a documentary already whispered about as groundbreaking, relentless, and necessary. When Amina Carter Blackwell stepped onto the stage, the applause rose like a wave, rolling through the hall with a force that seemed to shake the rafters. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but modest, reflecting the same quiet power she had carried from the moment she chose dignity over rage. And in her hands, cradled as reverently as a relic, was the Nobel Peace Prize for Technological Justice, the first award of its kind, the first awarded to a black woman, the first awarded to someone who had turned systemic cruelty into a technology that forced institutions to confront their own shadows. Cameras flashed. The audience held its breath. Amina stood at the podium, letting the moment settle before she spoke. Her voice was steady, warm, carrying through the hall with cinematic clarity. "When they poured Coca-Cola over me," she began, "they thought they were humiliating me, but they were watering a seed I had spent my whole life planting." 30 seconds in, the room was already misted with emotion. She continued, "Nova Vision was not created out of revenge. It was created out of necessity, because there are people, millions of them, who walk into rooms where their worth is questioned before they ever speak. I was one of them. Many of you were too." The screen behind her shifted, showing clips from the documentary, the screenshots, the emails, the footage of her standing calm in the storm of cruelty, then images of the Amina Carter Institute, students coding, debating, dreaming, rising. "Justice builds," she said. "Revenge destroys nothing but the vengeful." The crowd erupted again, some standing, others wiping their eyes. And somewhere among the applause, the story of the three who tried to break her surfaced in hushed tones. Victoria Hale, once feared and adored, now scraping for consulting gigs that never called back. Connor Briggs, rejected from job after job, reduced to delivering packages in a world where his name was synonymous with workplace harassment. Emily Tran, who vanished from the industry altogether, rumored to be living quietly in a small town, writing apology letters she never had the courage to send. Their downfall wasn't dramatic, it was silent, inevitable, self-made, and Amina never once mentioned them. Her victory didn't require their names. Another 30 seconds passed. A hush fell over the hall as Amina reached for a small folded paper in her pocket. "Before coming here tonight," she said, "I received a message." She opened it gently, her voice softening. It was from a 16-year-old girl in Detroit. She wrote, "Miss Carter, I just got into your scholarship program. I'm the first in my family to ever be accepted anywhere. Thank you for not giving up that day." Amina paused, blinking away emotion as the audience leaned in. "Her message reminded me why I stood still when they tried to tear me down. Because the world we build after injustice must be better than the world that allowed it." The hall erupted. Standing ovation, cheers, tears, a roaring gratitude for a woman who didn't just survive. She transformed. And long after the applause faded, one truth lingered in the air like a promise. Amina Carter didn't win because she had power. She won because she chose purpose. Stay with this story, because legends don't end. They echo. In the end, when the lights fade and the applause becomes memory, one truth remains. What happened to Amina Carter was never just about a spilled drink or a cruel joke. It was about a system that believed it could decide her worth, a system that underestimated the quiet resilience of a woman who refused to break. But the beauty of her story is that she never answered hatred with hatred. She answered it with creation, with purpose, with a vision large enough to lift others with her. And the people who tried to bury her learned a lesson they will carry far longer than any termination notice. Racism destroys those who commit it long before it destroys its victims. The final image we leave you with is not the fall of NovaSphere, nor the downfall of the bullies who built their own graves. It is Amina standing beneath the sunlit glass of the Amina Carter Institute for Technological Equity, the building that now bears her name. The same place that once tried to diminish her now stands as a monument to everything she became and everything she will inspire. Students pass by her, carrying laptops and dreams, young people who look at her story and realize they are not alone. Amina looks out at them with the calm certainty of someone who has turned pain into possibility. Someone who knows the future is built by those brave enough to confront the past. And now, it is your turn. If you have ever witnessed injustice, if you have ever seen someone silenced, overlooked, or pushed aside, tell your story. Share it. These stories matter. They change things. And if this journey moved you, if it reminded you of the power of justice over revenge, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but to help more people find stories that challenge them, inspire them, and remind them that change begins with one voice that refuses to stay quiet. Because, as Amina proved, sometimes all it takes to transform a broken system is one person who decides they will no longer accept the place others try to put them in.